Functionalism is a standpoint that argues that consciousness is something that arises when sufficiently complex systems are organized in the right kind of way, independent of the material the system is hosted on. From this point of view, there will be a conscious experience happening as long as a system has the right structure of processing information. For this video, I will assume that this functionalist view of consciousness is true. This leads to some interesting and unusual conclusions about the universe that we live in. Let's explore one of the possible consequences. Let's assume that a human brain has the right kind of structure to be able to generate a conscious experience. I do not believe that this is a controversial statement, given that you, the viewer, are a consciousness generated by a human brain. So let's start from there. The way neurons in the brain interact is very non-trivial. Connections between different neurons can strengthen or weaken over time, and these connections do not have to be exclusive to nearby neurons. They can also be to neurons that are in completely different parts of the brain. Furthermore, the neural signaling itself is an electrochemical process that doesn't translate neatly into simple digital signals. It's also important to mention that there is a big probabilistic component to neuron behavior. Despite all this, let's suppose that we could replace the neurons in your brain one by one with electronic circuitry that behaves the same as the neurons they replace. After each replacement, the structure remains exactly the same, meaning that when we're done replacing neurons, the new mechanical brain in your head still functions the same, so it is able to host a consciousness, and because the replacement was a continuous process, this new brain is associated with the same consciousness as the one that we started with. For convenience, let's replace the connections your robot brain has to the rest of your body with some kind of machine that simulates a virtual body. This machine sends the appropriate signals when the virtual body sees, smells, or touches something, and will move the virtual body appropriately when it receives signals from your brain to move a certain body part. I'll talk some more about this input and output that your brain has later, but let's keep it like this for the rest of the thought experiment. Everything is now powered by circuitry, which allows us to do something interesting. Let's slow everything down. Instead of signals taking microseconds to travel between neurons, the signals take entire seconds to travel between these mechanical neurons. The speed of the simulation with your virtual body also adjusts to match your mechanical brain. Again, everything still functions exactly the same way, so even though an outside observer might notice that individual thoughts now take days to happen instead of seconds, from the perspective of your consciousness, there won't be any change. To match the time increase, let's also increase the size of your brain by a factor of 1 million. We're now ready to do the final step of the procedure. Because the speed of exchange between mechanical neurons is slow enough, and the distances are large enough, we can replace them one by one with people. We assume that each person has been trained to know what kind of output to send to nearby neurons based on the input they receive, perhaps with the help of a calculator or external computer, but the person will be the one sending the signals to other mechanical neurons. Let's imagine that they do this by pressing some kind of button to send a signal to a specific neuron. While in the process of replacing every mechanical neuron with a person, we will eventually have situations where there is a connection between two humans. In this case, instead of pressing a button, the signal will be sent by one person saying a single word or a simple sentence to the other person, with the words based on the type of signal being sent. Eventually, your entire brain will just consist of a bunch of humans exchanging words with each other. Note that, from a purely functional perspective, your brain stays the same, so the conscious experience that is happening is still the same. But there is a big fundamental difference between this brain made from humans sending signals to each other and the brain made from neurons sending signals to each other. This is where it gets strange. Your consciousness is now some kind of overarching conscious experience that happens on top of a bunch of other consciousnesses. If you had to assign your conscious experience to a part of space, it would contain the same part of space occupied by other conscious beings, despite being disconnected from them. Up to this point, I tried my best to preserve the original structure of our brains, so I didn't need any assumptions other than the functionalist standpoint of how consciousness is generated to justify that such an overarching consciousness could exist. But let's speculate a bit about the implications. Could there maybe exist some kind of overarching consciousness with a different structure, made from the humans that exist today? Let's do a comparison. A brain has around 86 billion neurons, so that's more than the 8 billion people on the planet. However, the information exchange between two people can be much richer than the information exchange between two neurons. The average neuron is connected with thousands of other neurons, which is definitely more than the amount of meaningful relations the average person has. But we should also consider the incoming signals you receive from the news, social media, and the internet in general, which would bump up the number of connections significantly, and also makes our information exchange really a global phenomenon. Furthermore, the most influential people, such as politicians or musicians, can send signals to hundreds of millions of people, which is a lot more than the most connected neurons, the Purkinje cells, that are connected with up to 200,000 other neurons. Throughout the thought experiment, I kept a machine that simulates a virtual body because to preserve a human consciousness, we need the inputs and outputs of a human body. But if an overarching consciousness generated by the exchanges between humans existed, how would the input it would receive and the output it would experience look? Perhaps the input is the discoveries that have been made, the political discourse that is happening, cultural values that are changing over time. This overarching consciousness could have thoughts that take months or years to form based on new ideas that spread through the population. And the output, the actions that this consciousness experiences doing, might be something like the actions that humans take that come from these ideas. The mining of resources because a new ore deposit has been found, the building of new homes by the local municipality, the creation of art by artists. The abstract, intangible concepts that we discuss with each other might be what this consciousness experiences as their, in a sense, physical reality. Admittedly, whether society has an overarching consciousness is probably not the first thing on your mind when you wake up in the morning. So you might be asking yourself, so what? So what if society is conscious or not? It doesn't change anything about my own life. But if you believe in the existence of a consciousness that experiences the ideas we have and the actions we do as a collective, that might just be the change in perspective that you need to be motivated to spread positive ideas, to take actions that benefit not just yourself, but also the people around you, to make the world a better place. Thank you for watching. I'd love to hear your opinions. If you're interested in these kinds of videos, consider subscribing. See you next time.